electeds and all of you. Thank you very much for being here today. This is, at the beginning of the year, the executives, the government executives, lay out their plan, their vision for the state, for the country, whatever the case may be. And it's called the State of the State for a governor. Tonight we'll hear the State of the Union for the president, which is the broad brush, the conceptual outline of what is the state of the state, what is the state of the country, and what do we want to get done. Following the State of the State is the budget presentation, which is really the specifics and the meat on the bones, if you will, on how we're going to implement that plan. And I did the State of the State, and I did my budget presentation in January, and those presentations are historically done to the legislative body. The President will give his State of the Union tonight to a joint session of Congress, and I presented it to the Senate and the Assembly. But for me, the relationship is basically simple. I work for the people of the state of New York. I work for you. You elected me. And this is the relationship that is important to me. So I present to the politicians in Albany, but then I want to present the plan to you because I want to know what you think. I want to know your opinion. I want to know what you think makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And I believe the government often follows the people. And if I have your support and you understand the plan and you're committed, then the politicians will follow you. And if we've had success in the past couple of years in Albany, actually getting the state government to function is for that very simple reason. Because the politicians often follow the lead of the people. And I think the people's voice has been clear for the past 2 years, and I think that's why we've been making we've had success, and I want to continue to keep it going. We call this presentation this year New York Rising. We've had difficulty, we've had issues, but I think New York is going to be rising from that difficulty stronger than ever before. The past few months, there's been a blizzard of news, good news and bad news, and it's confusing. There's been so much. And I think to begin, it's a moment to take our bearings. 2 years ago, I was elected governor of the state of New York, and I said the state was at a crossroads, and that we needed to chart a new course and begin a new journey for the state because it had a lot of problems for a lot of years. We had decades of decline, especially all through the Hudson Valley and all through upstate New York. And it was time to start a comeback for this great state and for the state to organize itself around several core elements. First, about attracting good jobs and economic growth, because that is the engine that pulls the train, a world-class education system, a state government that actually had a fiscal integrity and a sense of fiscal discipline, and to restore New York as a progressive capital, because it's one of the things that made New York the great state and the state that all the other states look to. I think we are on our way. We've made great progress over the past 2 years. Governor Al Smith used to say, let's look at the record. Gone is the obstructionist state bureaucratic culture. We have a new sense in the state of New York. We call it entrepreneurial government. The entrepreneurial government does not have to be an oxymoron. Government should think in an entrepreneurial, creative way how to get things done. Gone is the tax capital mentality, the New York mentality that the answer to everything was more taxes and put your hand in the pocket of the taxpayer and just withdraw greater sums. You can't do that. We've replaced it with a new mentality that is a property tax cap that says you have to stop raising property taxes because you're taxing people out of their homes literally. Tier 6, which reduced the pension benefits, which are an unsustainable cost going forward. And we actually reduced taxes for the middle class, people earning up to $300,000 per year. So we now have the lowest middle class tax rate in 58 years, believe it or not. And this was a big shift from the old New York, which was just about raising taxes. And gone is the political gridlock, the finger pointing, the argumentation. And you now have a government that's actually working together and working for the people of the state. We said we were going to set out to bridge the divide, that we were going to go from yesterday to tomorrow, from what was to what can be, from the dysfunction of Albany to a government that actually performs for the people, from the cynicism of what we can't do to the trust and restoring the public trust of people. Breaking the political gridlock and actually getting people to work together and put their politics aside, because we're not Democrats and Republicans. We're New Yorkers first. And let's put the politics aside and do what's right for the state of New York and the people of the district and make government actually work. And the government is working, and it's working literally, and it's working metaphorically, and it's working better and faster than it has ever done, and we actually are literally building a bridge. Not just a symbolic, metaphoric bridge, but a bridge, the Tappan Zee Bridge. And it is going to be a beautiful, big, bold, beautiful example of what we can actually do. And we have made more progress in 1 year in building that bridge than progress we had previously made in 10 years of talking about the bridge. And that is the metaphor of what we want to do. Make the government work. Actually perform tasks that bring us forward as a state. Well, with it, maybe we can just say our job is done over the past 2 years. Unfortunately, we have a lot more to do. The national economy is better, but it is not great, and it's not doing what we need it to do. Being a progressive capital of the nation is an ongoing, continuing responsibility. We still need to do better for our children in terms of public education. Mother Nature has not been kind to us and has given us additional challenges. So let's begin on the agenda going forward. The 1-2 punch for New York is education and jobs. And jobs are the engine that drives everything else. We started a new effort called the New York Open for Business campaign. Changing the attitude, changing the reality that we want business to be here, we want business to locate here, and we want business to stay here. The macro effort in that regard was to bring a sense of fiscal integrity back to the state. After years of chaos and arguments and looking like a ship of fools every budget season, we actually passed responsible budgets, and we actually passed them on time for the past 2 years. And we have to do it again, because it's just something to a statement of fiscal responsibility that you actually have a budget, you get a budget done, and you get it done on time by the April 1 deadline. We also made a profound pledge to New Yorkers in the process that we would not raise taxes. To the extent there's a deficit and there's a shortfall, government would clean up its own house rather than saying to the taxpayers during this hard economy, we need more money to close the deficit. We've done it for the past 2 years, and we must do it again this year. This is a chart of the state budget. We have a $1.3 billion deficit this year. That sounds like a lot of money, $1.3 billion. It is a lot of money. But compared to where we were, it is much, much better. 2 years ago, we had a $10 billion deficit. If we hadn't done what we did over the past 2 years, the deficit line would have been that top white line. The deficit would have been $17 billion. So the corrections we've made over the past 2 years are actually bearing fruit, and we're going to close the $1.3 billion deficit this year. How do we do it? Basically, we're going to reduce the state operations and find efficiencies within the state operating budget, again, rather than doing tax increases, etc. To drive the economy, second, we have to keep and continue our regional economic development councils, which are working very well. We started this last year, and it's a simple premise. People say, grow the New York State economy. There is no New York State economy. There are separate regional economies. New York City is one economy. Buffalo is a different economy. The Adirondacks are a different economy. There is no one New York State economic development plan. And what you really need to do is focus region by region across the state, find out what that regional economy is, and then support that regional economy. And that approach has been bearing fruit. Your President, Dennis Murray, has been great as the co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council. They just won a big award on a competitive basis for having the best regional growth plan. It was presented by Maria Bartiromo. They really wanted to have Maria Bartiromo, by the way, in the middle between the two of them, handing the plaque. But you don't always get what you want in life. Give President Dennis Murray another round of applause. The main economic challenge for this state going forward is going to be in the area of tech transfer. Because if you see what economies are excelling across the country, the common denominator are ideas, cutting ideas that are coming out of higher education institutions and are being commercialized. That transfer from academia to commercialization. And in this state, that's where we're losing ground. New York has the research dollars, and we're creating the ideas, but they're going to other states to be commercialized and start businesses. So we're second in terms of research dollars, but we only get 4% of the venture capital money, while California is attracting about half of the venture capital money. New York is 22nd in nation industry research compared to North Carolina. This is the economic challenge for this state's future. Excelling at this transfer. The new ideas coming out of schools, but capitalizing them here to form businesses here. We want to start a program called Innovation Hotspots, which is this. We'll form partnerships in higher education facilities with local businesses, and we'll have a business incubator for these startup businesses, where we will give them literally a physical location, all the support services, the lawyers, the accountants to help grow the business. We'll make it a tax-free zone. So while they're developing their business, they're paying no taxes. And there's only one condition. They have to stay here when they form their business and hire employees here and hire New Yorkers to keep that business that we birthed in the state of New York. That's the Innovation Hotspot program, and I'm very excited about that. At the same time, we have to reduce the cost of doing business. Every businessman will say it's too expensive to do business in the state of New York, and they'll talk about the unemployment insurance and the workers' comp costs. We're going to overhaul both systems this year, the streamlining and simplifying, which will save $1.3 billion in businesses. So that will significantly reduce the cost to existing businesses and again make New York State more business friendly. One of the other challenges is to have a ready workforce. This is also an opportunity. When you look at our workforce training programs, it is from a different era. It is when we were training for manufacturing jobs, literally. And our SUNY and our CUNY community college system has a generic job training program that doesn't really work anymore. We have to flip the approach, in my opinion, to a job linkage program, where you first identify the job and you train for that job. And we have an opportunity, because the jobs are coming back from overseas. What happened is all the corporations said, well, we have a great idea, we're going to move overseas because the cost of labor is cheaper. You know what they found? They found that you get what you pay for. And the cost of labor was cheaper, but they didn't have the skill set that they needed to do the jobs. So now they're coming back to this country because the skill set was paramount. That's the opportunity for this state. We have 210,000 unfilled jobs in the state of New York right now. 210,000. Because people don't have the skill set for the job. Everything is highly specialized now. The next generation New York Job Linkage Program, identify the employer, identify the job, find out the exact skills they need for that job, and then the community college trains literally that skill set linked to that job. We'll go back to basically the old apprentice days, where you have an apprenticeship program for every job, and that's what our community college system will do. One of the other aspects with the economy is once you find the person a job, the job has to pay a decent wage. Teddy Roosevelt talked about having a wage that is sufficient to cover the bare cost of living. State sets a minimum wage. Right now the minimum wage in the state of New York is $14,600 per year. The average cost of gasoline for a family of four, $1,200 per year. Electricity, $1,300. Auto insurance, $1,400. Annual cost of groceries, $6,500 per year. Annual cost of child care, $10,000. Annual cost of housing, $15,000. In and of itself, more than the living wage. It just doesn't add up. States all around us, our border states have all raised the minimum wage so that we're no longer in pace. I propose raising the minimum wage, make it $8.75 an hour. It's the right thing to do, it's the fair thing to do, and it is long overdue. And I'd like to see the we'll be focusing on upstate New York and the Hudson Valley. We're going to start a Market New York program, which is going to be a multifaceted market program. First, focusing on the many products that we make here in the state of New York. Many of us don't even know and appreciate what we do, the great New York State wines, the beers, the yogurts. We'll start a Taste New York program that is going to aggressively market New York products. We're going to have duty-free shops all across the state as a way to introduce people to New York grown and produced products. Also, we'll have a marketing campaign for regional attractions. You know, people don't really appreciate what we have in this state. And we have a lot of tourists to New York City, but they don't really know what we have across the rest of the state. And we're going to incentivize the counties to work together again in this regional construct to really tell the story of their region. You have the beautiful Western New York, Niagara Falls region, you have the Finger Lakes, Thousand Islands, you have the Hudson Valley. That picture should be familiar to you. That picture should be more familiar to you. And we have great potential for economic development. We just have to tell our story, and I believe the advertising campaigns will help. I believe citing upstate resort and casinos is an economic development opportunity. Now, the state of New York technically is not in the casino business. Why? Because our Constitution specifically says gaming is not allowed, so we don't have casinos. What happened was, because the state wanted to get around that prohibition on casinos, the state authorized something called racinos. What are racinos? They are basically casinos with an R. And we located these all across the state of New York. So you have people who go to what look like, sound like, smell like casinos. But we still tell ourselves that we are not in the casino business. We are in the racino business, whatever that is. And we don't regulate it like a casino business. Frankly, we're not making the revenues that we should be making as if it was really a casino business. But it is where we are. Recognize the reality, and let's do it right, and let's earn the income that we could be earning from the casino business. We have states all around us that are operating casinos, that are creating jobs, that are making more money from our New York people. I propose a real casino gaming plan that builds resort destinations that can do regional growth and create hundreds of jobs in a region. You have 8 million people in New York City. You have 50 million tourists coming into New York City. Part of the challenge for the Hudson Valley and upstate New York, get that mass of people north. You're coming to New York City, great. Do a day trip to the Hudson Valley. Come to the Hudson Valley and visit our resort casino. But getting that 50 million people and their dollars, frankly, north to the Hudson Valley and upstate. And I believe a casino resort complex could be a magnet that does that. I propose to the legislature a first phase where we do up to 3, all Hudson Valley, upstate, so it's an attraction to bring the people from New York City up. But I'll only support it if the legislature actually passes a non-political process. I don't want to get involved in a politicized casino business, and unless it's a fully independent process, I won't support it, but I believe there's a great opportunity for the state of New York. Education is one of the greatest priorities for government. It always has been. In terms of education, I have 2 words: we need more and we need better. Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan pointed out one of the problems and one of the reasons that why this nation is falling behind other countries in terms of education is they just educate their children more. They just spend more time in the classroom. We have an education calendar that is based on the agrarian economy. Our children have off during the summers because we needed them to work in the fields. Some still do, but by and large, this calendar no longer makes sense. And when you look at the number of days and the amount of time we spend educating, you see that we're falling behind. What is the answer? More learning time. More learning time. Well, how would you have more learning time? Well, there's three options. You could have a longer school day, more hours per day. You could have a longer year, less of a summer vacation, etc. Or you could have a combination of both. Most people agree more education is a good idea, but the exact how to and when gets very controversial right away, especially with children, by the way. The way we want to approach it is, there are 700 school districts in the state of New York. We want to make it an option for every school district to consider. And a school district can decide to have a longer day, a school district can decide to have a longer year, a school district can decide to do absolutely nothing, and stay exactly where they are. I'm advocating for more time, and as an incentive for a school district to do it, if they extend a day or if they extend a year, the state will pay 100% of the additional cost as an incentive for a school district to actually do it, because it is in the best interest of the children. We just have to make the transition. And I hope school districts do. Same thing is true with early education. The advantages of pre-K have been documented all across the board. A child that goes to pre-K does better in school, less likelihood that they will drop out, less likelihood that they'll enter a juvenile delinquent system. We should provide real pre-K for all our children. It's only a question of priority, and we should start now. In terms of education in distressed communities, this is a question of definition of the problem in many ways. Education is one situation in a richer community, and it's a different situation in a poorer community. A school in a poorer community is called on to do much, much more than just educate a child. A school in a poorer community, that teacher is teacher / nurse / counselor / nutritionist. So to say both functions are the same is wrong. It's just wrong. To compare one to the other, it's not apples to oranges. The demands are much, much different. Let's recognize that differentiation. The school in a poorer community, let's call it a community school, and it's really about an education facility, but it's also a social service facility, and a mentoring facility, and an after-school facility, and let's put the support services in that school to actually give that child the full support that they need. While education and economic opportunity are the priorities, there's also more to New York. New York has been the equality capital of the nation. From our very beginning, we were the state of diversity, and we had to figure it out first. And we did. And there's more to do, because there's still inequality in our
These two
society.
babies were born in the same hospital on the same day at the same time. They will both go home to loving families and good homes. They will attend good schools, get the same grades, and earn the same degree. They will enter the same profession, but their lives will be much different. One will earn, on average, $11,000 less per year and $500,000 less over a lifetime. The other is 32 times more likely to become a CEO or serve on a corporate board. One is 5 times more likely to be sexually harassed or become a victim of domestic violence, and more than twice as likely to be a victim of housing or lending discrimination. One is twice as likely to become a single parent living in poverty, and twice as likely to live out old age in poverty. Why? Because one is a girl. It's not right. It's not fair. It's time for a Women's Equality Act.
government passed the Marriage Equality Act 2 years ago. And that Marriage Equality Act was a very simple but profound statement that said all people are equal. That passage of the Marriage Equality Act resonated all across the nation. It did make history. Let's do the same thing and let's pass a Women's Equality Act, because it is also true that discrimination against women exists today. And it is unconscionable, it is illegal, it has to stop, and it should stop in New York State. We propose a 10-point Women's Equality Act. Number one, shatters the glass ceiling with a real equal pay law. Women still make 77 cents to a man's dollar. Zero tolerance for sexual harassment. Strengthen employment, lending, and housing anti-discrimination laws. Human trafficking laws and family status discrimination. Prevent landlords from denying housing to qualified based on source of funds. Stop housing discrimination for victims of domestic violence. Stop pregnancy discrimination. Protect victims of domestic violence and protect a woman's right to choose. There's an issue of gun violence, which is unavoidable. If you live in this society today, it's been all around us. It was in Newtown, Connecticut, as you know. It was in Webster, New York, right outside of Rochester. It's been Columbine, but it's been a constant and chronic series of gun violence that have killed many innocent lives. We passed a gun policy bill on the first day of session, which is reasonable, it's balanced, it's measured, it respects hunters and sportsmen, but it ends the unnecessary risk of high-capacity assault rifles. It keeps guns from criminals and the mentally ill. It bans assault weapons. It closes the private sale loophole by requiring federal background checks. It enacts tougher penalties for illegal guns, and something called the Webster provision, which is a mandatory life sentence without parole for someone who kills a first responder. This is a politically charged issue. It is a controversial issue. But that New York State legislature stood up and they passed this bill and they did the right thing, and they should be applauded for their political courage. We have to do all of this, and then we have to respond to the crisis that Mother Nature brought to us. And it actually wasn't one crisis, but it was two crises. We had Hurricane Irene, Storm Lee in 2011, that we are still recovering from, and then we had Hurricane Sandy on October 29th. And the first order of business is to actually learn from what has happened. And the fact is that climate change is real. It's not a political statement. It is inarguable that the sea is warmer and that there is a changing weather pattern. And we now have 100-year floods every 3 years. So the time to act is now. We have to make the government work better and faster than it's worked in a long time. And we have to be smarter in not just rebuilding, but building back better and building back smarter and learning the lesson of the storm and making sure that the next time, and I believe there will be a next time, we're in a better position to deal with it. Part of it is mitigating the effect of weather changes on how we design and build homes. Part of it is where we build them, and the state will offer a buyout program for people who've had a series of floods and would rather move on, and the state will buy out their homes and leave that land empty. We have to harden our infrastructure. We have to harden our airports. It can't be every time there's a storm, the airport is closed down for a week. We have to harden our fuel delivery system. The chaos of fuel in New York City after the last storm and the lines and the delays, that was all caused by a day and a half reduction in delivery of fuel. A day and a half caused weeks of mayhem because we had no fuel reserve. And when the electricity goes out, the pumps go out. And when the pumps go out, the fuel delivery stops and it cripples the entire state. We have to harden our utilities. It can't be every time the wind blows, a branch breaks, a line comes down, and we're out of power. And we need to redesign our power system. We need to redesign our emergency response system so we are prepared to deal with this. We want to capitalize on the New York spirit of volunteerism, that saw people come from all over the state to help. We're going to start a statewide volunteer corps of people who are pre-selected and trained in how to deal with an emergency response and be ready to be deployed at any given time. And we're also going to be empowering local communities to come up with their own locally drawn plans on how to rebuild. These are the eligible community reconstruction zones from Hurricane Irene and Lee, and Hurricane Sandy will be on the northern shore of Long Island and New York City. The good news is we were successful in getting $30 billion in aid from the Congress to rebuild after Sandy. That $30 billion will be eligible for Sandy reconstruction, and the way the law was written, will also be eligible for Irene and Lee reconstruction, which hit big parts of the Hudson Valley, Schoharie, and up into the North Country. So that is really very, very good news. The best news is that we are New Yorkers, and the best news is that we are united. And I think in some ways, the storm, Sandy, Irene, Lee, while causing much damage, also had a silver lining. And that silver lining is that it brought New Yorkers together in a way they haven't been together in a long time. And maybe it takes a really difficult situation to get people to come together and forget their differences. But this state saw people come from all over in the spirit of citizenship and volunteerism just to be there one for another. And I believe in my core that if this state is united and we are working together, there is nothing that we can't do. We have every asset that is imaginable. We have the best workforce, we have the best history, the best geography, the best institutions, the best higher ed institutions. And when we are united and set upon a course, you're going to see this state build back better than we ever have been before. And I've set as a goal not just to build back where we were, but to build this state back to a level we've never been before. And that's what we're going to be doing this year. Coming together as New Yorkers, putting our differences aside, focusing on the commonality, and making this state of New York the greatest state in the nation. That's our agenda, and that's what we're doing.